Hey, welcome to the channel. We hope that you enjoy today's stories and check out the chapters on the video to see all the stories for today. But before we get into this video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to get notified when we release a new video. So let's get into the video.
For the former non-believers in the paranormal, what incident made you finally believe? Part 2.
Story 1. For as long as I could remember, I've been Christian, so I believe in people having souls. I never believed that sometimes they refuse to or can't move on and stay trapped on the earth. And for good, my mom would always cite these ghost encounters she'd had, and then she started working at a nearby office. She had said that there was a ghost in there, but I never believed it. In hindsight, it was haunted for sure. A heavier light fixture, maybe about 10 or so pounds, would sway pretty heavily on its own. And one time, as I joke, I even provoked it, and it swayed and I did that stupid OMG so scary haha BS anyways. One night it was super late and she needed to get some work done, and I wanted to go with because spooky ghost, right? Kind of a mistake. When we got into the office, it felt like whatever was in there was determined to freak me out. In the actual office room, there was a weird buzzing only I was hearing. Like an eerie mixture of a low-pitched 30s movie ambulance siren and one of those disaster sirens at a weird pitch too. And I asked her if she was hearing it too. Nope. So, I stepped out into the main room and nothing. It was like the sound was trapped there. Cut about an hour later, she's printing stuff out. And this is one of those big-ass printers you see in offices on shows and whatever. So, it was decently loud. She ran it maybe 3 or 4 times. And after each one it would ding. Well, after that 3rd or 4th time, I heard a low growl. Like a mean dog, you've been taunting for an hour. And it came from the direction of the printer. I was really hoping something broke, but my mom didn't hear it. I was done with that right the hell away, and from then on, I have never doubted the paranormal. Even thinking about it makes my stomach drop. Story 2. Was renovating a 100-year-old house. Looking at plans with my boss on the back patio, I see someone walk into the kitchen and don't think much of it. They walked right up the window and tapped loudly 3 times. My boss and I turned to look, and no one was there. A few other very weird things occurred on that job, but that one event changed how I thought about some paranormal stuff. Story 3. I'm very skeptical about ghosts, as I believe we accept death as a finality, as there is no evidence of life after death. That being said, I'd been wide awake sitting in my tiny bedroom and felt a hand grab my shoulder. I turned to what would be my closet, knowing there was no way anything could have been there. Why could nothing have been there? Because I don't leave my room for much other than a coffee. And I rarely leave the house. Let alone the room I'm in has very little space. Anyone could maneuver just one thin walking path around my bed. Naturally, I just got goosebumps and froze. Then chose to ignore it as whatever it was stopped. FYI, it was an adult-sized hand I felt grab my left shoulder while I was sitting in a chair with a large backrest. Whatever had grabbed me, if it had been a living human, it would not have had an angle to grab my shoulder. Whatever it had grabbed me as the chair was non-existent. The only possible explanation I could think of is some sort of human nervous system issue that makes you feel things that aren't there. But I don't know if that's a thing. Also, if it is, I'd have to have the condition in order for it to be answered by that. Some details I chose to omit some because I'm not certain if I can prove that shadows were moving, as the only thing I saw when I turned my head was a shadow that quickly disappeared. Trick of the eyes perhaps. But I promise you something did grab me. Story 4. When I was a kid, after being SA, I was lying in bed. I wasn't asleep yet and the hallway light was on. I could hear the TV downstairs in the living room. I was looking into the hallway and all of a sudden, I saw the face look around the corner and the fave had the grin. It scared me so bad I couldn't even scream. Story 5. Back in 2017, I used to work at a Subway restaurant over here in San Diego, California. One night when I was closing with a coworker, some strange stuff happened. First, a light at the corner of the store randomly turns off, so we go to investigate. As we were walking over, I felt an electric shock hit me on the back of the neck. Immediately after that, a cold gust of wind seemingly manifested out of nowhere and blasted right through me. Today, I have never been able to come up with a reasonable explanation. And funny also because I used to sort of mock my other coworkers about their experiences there until I went through an experience myself. Story 6. My cousin tragically died at age 26 a few years ago, and I've had a few experiences that were just too weird to not question. One of the most obvious ones happened at his funeral service. I actually worked as a funeral director for a while after he died, so I'm more aware now of the fact that this was abnormal. The pastor speaking at the end of his service stepped completely away from the podium, which had the microphone on it. He was speaking passionately to us all in our grief when he said the words, "He is with us right now." And at that moment, seriously, this static interference blared through the speakers. Nothing was near the podium or microphone to cause that to happen. I knew exactly at that moment it was my cousin coming through. I heard some people around me have a surprised reaction like they were thinking the same thing as me, but no one ever talked about it. I have held onto it since then. There's another scenario where I had this classic ringing alarm clock I bought since I'm a heavy-ass sleeper and started college classes. I tried setting the alarm, but I could never get it to go off, so it was useless to me. I stuffed it away in the bottom of a box and tucked it in the back of my closet and forgot all about it since it never worked. One day I was going through my dresser and found some tank tops that belonged to my cousin. I was holding one of them and my stomach dropped because I heard this insane ringing. I was scared because I couldn't believe it. I ran to my closet and desperately shuffled ish around to get to that box and sure enough pulled out the ringing alarm clock. I ripped the batteries out fast as hell and I just felt shocked. I'm comforted by these signs, but at the moment it's always been oh snap, like I'm scared to believe it's really him. I dream about him often. It's always lucid dreams where I realize I'm asleep because I can see him and I know he's dead. But I don't wake up after I realize I'm asleep. I stay in the dream and just soak in his presence because I'm happy to see him. Another story, unrelated to my cousin, but one day in high school I came home and just immediately fell asleep on my bed. It was light out when I got home, so I didn't turn on my light or anything. I just fell asleep. I had this weird dream my house was haunted, and I had to have some women come to cleanse the house of the ghosts that were there. When I woke up, the second my eyes opened, I was horrified that my floor lamp was on. I was terrified because it wasn't on when I fell asleep, and it's the type you need to twist with 2 fingers and let it click while turning before the light comes on. I literally thought someone broke into my house because that was the only explanation for that light. I was frozen for a while before I bit the bullet and decided to leave my bedroom. I searched the house, but no one was home. I had multiple weird experiences in that house. I had friends leave in the middle of sleepovers because they felt weird. Unexplained sounds of cabinets slamming, loud footsteps that would walk up the stairs but never lead anywhere or have any explanation. I'm still skeptical enough to sometimes explain it away that maybe I was baddish delusional at the time and hallucinating all of it. But the experiences were so real and scared the crap out of me always whenever I'd be home alone. I live in a different house now that the old person before had died in, but I have no problems ever here, though I've had friends say they see figures at night sometimes. I love this house. Story 7. When 20, I was 100% skeptic. A friend dies in a distant city. In my room, enjoying music, El Tiburon, Proyecto 1, suddenly start laughing like my friend, a goofy type, particularly laughed, for 5 minutes. The next morning, got a call. My friend has died in a gas leak. I knew that he was saying goodbye. I start believing in the paranormal that night. Story 8. I used to own a Dodge ambulance that was from the Jamaica Hospital in New York. We made a work truck out of it, and one night we observed for approximately 3 minutes the whole inside lighting up with a light bluish, very bright light. I'm a believer. Story 9. I was young, and my mom had gotten this old green station wagon from a family member. It was a part of the Mopar family and had a 318 in it, but it was never constant. Some days it would crank right up, other days you could try to jump it off for hours and nothing, so I ended up making it a huge golf cart, lol. We rented and the landlord had over 100 arches behind our house, so I would drive it up and down the path. One day my neighbor, who was a couple of years older than me, drove his Mustang down the path just to mess with me. So as soon as I saw him, I went out and jumped in the wagon and it fired right up. When I hit the first curve at the top of the hill before the pond, it died. I tried and tried and tried. Gave it a break hoping to not flood it, and before trying the last time I said out loud, "Please crank," and as clear as I said "please crank" I heard a clear "no." I jumped out of that car, ran home, and left it in the middle of the path for 2 days. LOL, then pretended it never happened and went on with life as if nothing had happened. But I knew then. Story 10. I always believed, because I worked life support as my first job and even practiced occult rituals, but the turning point was perceiving the meaning of as above, so below as an nth degree of an out-of-body experience, and seeing the universe as both a single entity and a single fragmented ideation of self at once, after invoking the Ein Sof for proof of its existence.
If you're enjoying today's video, smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos and interesting stories. Now let's get back to the stories of our lives.
Story 11. I've had numerous paranormal incidents, but the big one was when a very good friend of mine died. I was crushed. Absolutely crushed. I went to his memorial and then left and went to a private area on the beach. As I pulled into the spot, I turned my radio down. Like I always do. I cried. I yelled. I was angry and sad. I finally packed up to leave, got in my truck and pulled out when the volume on the radio, turned dial, went to full volume and the lyrics on the song playing were "I'm still alive, I have never braked so hard," and I slammed the off button. I have some of his ashes now and haven't heard a peep since. It was an accidental overdose and alcohol, he wasn't ready to go. Left 4 kiddos behind. Story 12. I recall the year 2012, it was summer. I went off with my old 97 Chevy car to run some errands and heard static, but then heard a song from my old childhood. It reminded me of the good old days when I was younger. I cranked the volume and carried on. It's a Spanish old song. I try looking for the cassette that's playing, because there's no way an old Spanish song is playing in an all-English area. I could not believe there was no cassette tape. I was driving around, so it couldn't have been picking up someone else's music. The static soon came on when I was heading home, and the music finally faded. Until all I heard was static noise. Very odd incident, and until this day, I don't know what would cause this. No family or friend died during this era of my life. Story 13. Anything seemingly magic is just a science that hasn't been explained yet. I had a visitation by our cousins from the future when I was 4 years old. They asked if I had any questions of them. I thought for a bit, and the biggest question was why their eyes were so different from mine. I found out they are us, just in the future after natural and forced evolution changes us. There were a few tall grays in the background, and 3 short gray aliens that I asked the question showed me psychically. Their eyes behind the black lens, it was human, just larger than ours today, and each had beautiful brown, blue, and green eyes. From what I gleaned later in life through research, in the future their technology is radioactive, and their body's synthetic skin is shielded, yet the eyes are not and still have to be shielded or they would go blind. It's probably not just that though, multifunctional like Google Glasses / a view screen. I can't say for certain if they had implants, yet I'd go so far as to say that it's safe to assume their entire bodies were synthetic / produced through technology and not mammalian birth, and the eyes were probably the only part that wasn't or perhaps not as modified to the same degree as the rest of the body. Edit. Just thinking on this now, in the future if they did surround themselves in radioactive environments, their skin could in theory act as a power conduit. Since radiation exists everywhere in the universe in some form or another, it could be the most efficient source of energy to feed on. Story 14. I never believed. Until I was 13 or 14, staying up late to sneak on the phone and talk to my boyfriend. I used to sleep with my blinds completely open because I believed I was safe since lurking things in the darkness didn't exist. Plus, my bedroom was on the sloping side of the house, so even though it's the first floor, I was 10 to 12 feet up. The crawl space beneath me was huge. I started hearing what sounded like someone walking around under the house, and I told my parents. They said it must be my friends coming around trying to scare me, even though we lived miles outside of town and my friends/their parents almost never wanted to drive out that far to pick me up during the daytime, much to help their kids prank me at 3 a.m. One night I'm on the phone with my boyfriend, chatting it up, just my snake's purple UV lamp lighting up the room, and I look up to see this glowing green creature sitting on the windowsill looking at me. It's small, like a foot tall or less. I freak out on the phone going,
OMG! OMG! OMG!
and I hang up on the boyfriend and jump up to look. This thing realizes I'm not sleeping and jumps down and disappears. I called him back immediately to explain what happened, but he didn't believe me. I was terrified and I didn't sleep for years after that, even with my blinds closed tight with blackout curtains. If unknown things exist, they can be anywhere at any time. It opened up a whole can of worms, and I've seen some weirdish can't explain several times since. Some good, most scary. In my 30s now and still trying to conquer my fear of sleeping alone in the dark. I'm a science brain, by the way. Was an inorganic chemist for 10 years after college. Truth is stranger than our brains will ever comprehend. Story 15. The first experience, I was very young, probably 4 to 5 years old, but I remember it vividly. My parents were asleep and basically, I was awake late at night watching something on VHS, probably a Disney movie. A young boy figure appeared and started talking to me saying he needed help. At first, I wasn't scared, but it started feeling off and scary, so I started screaming and of course, my parents rushed in. I kept telling them about the boy and they didn't believe me. Told me to go back to sleep. Don't think I slept that night, lol. Story 16. My sister worked at a place that had a portal open up, etc. I always thought it was complete BS. Then my family was convinced we had something in our house. They're overreacting, they're paranoid, etc. was what I told myself. Then things got weird. Doors opening by themselves, drawers open occasionally, etc. Everyone is on edge. Then one day we were watching a movie in the basement when a loud smack sound filled the house. Sounded like a door being kicked in. Me and my dad flew up the stairs to find every single drawer and cabinet in the kitchen wide open. Every single one. I was the last one upstairs, and there was no way to explain that to me. We did a cleanse and a blessing, and it all stopped. Everything. Story 17. I lived in a haunted house until I joined the Coast Guard. A bit of history first. My mother came from a long line of women, her mother, grandmother, and so on, considered with the gift. Our house had many odd incidents happen. Also, our pets would also hiss and bark at spots where there was no one. Now the story. My father worked shift, and when he worked the night shift, my mother would take my 2-year-old brother into her bed for company. During the night, my brother started to roll back and forth on the bed, fairly violently. My mother got up and turned on the light. She saw bruises appearing on his neck which looked like fingers. In fact, she believed that he was being strangled, and he was fighting against whatever was harming him. My mother waved her arm between my brother and whatever was above him. At that moment, everything subsided. I saw those marks the next morning. I was 12. Story 18. Got in my mom's car to move it into the carport, and her pre-programmed radio came on when the engine started, but instead of it playing music from a well-known station, it was just static. In the static, as I was moving the car only a few feet, I heard a very strong and very obvious "get out." Needless to say, I got out. Story 19. One time in college, a random guy off the street went inside the campus. He was a magician. It was a long time ago, but what I remember, clear as day, is how he laid some eyeglass frames on the floor. A massive crowd of people were surrounding him. And without even touching the glasses, the frames began to hover in the air. People were shocked, and so was I. When we asked how he did, all he said is, "I can't say because the master will be mad at me." Some really weird stuff. So, if I believe in magic or superpowers, then I believe in anything that would be paranormal. Story 20. I have 2 stories, but this is the one that stands out the most. When I was a teenager, my friends went through a phase where they would mess around with a Ouija board, which I absolutely hated. One evening, we were all having some drinks at a friend's house, and out comes one of my friends carrying the darn thing. I rolled my eyes and walked away, and just made fun of my silly friends with another guy that was there. Mind you, there were like 20 of us at this house. It was kind of crowded, and it had started to spill out to the front door and garage. They kept asking these really dumb questions like, "What's the zodiac sign of so-and-so? And what about the zodiac sign of so-and-so?" I rolled my eyes and said to the friend I was with, "It's like they think it's Walter Mercado, hee hee." Walter Mercado was a famous TV astrologer, ubiquitous in Mexican culture a good 25 years ago. Mind you, the place was crowded, there was music, and I said this to him in normal conversation, when we were by ourselves a good 2 to 3 meters away from anyone else. Also, the both of us were a good 8 meters away from the pair that was asking the questions. After a few minutes, the pair that was asking the questions started asking really loudly, "Hey, is there a Walter in here? Who's Walter?" Everybody looked puzzled. Of course, there was no Walter there. When asked why they wanted to know, the pair moving the board said because it just spelt IAMNOTWALTER, and I just noped out of there.
If you've enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and check out more videos from the channel.